Some days, every step feels like wading through deep water. You wake up with a plan, but the world seems to push back. Projects stall. Conversations feel strained. Even the smallest tasks require a monumental effort of will. We are taught that this friction is a sign of hard work. We tell ourselves that struggle is the price of progress. But have you ever noticed those other moments? The days when doors swing open before you even reach for the handle? When the right person calls at the exact moment you think of them? This contrast isn't a matter of luck or timing. It is the first visible sign of a precise mechanical law operating beneath the surface of your daily life. You aren't fighting the world. You are experiencing the tension of a frequency that no longer fits who you are. We have all been there. You push harder, work longer hours, and double your resolve, yet the results seem to retreat further away. It feels as if you are swimming against a powerful current that you cannot see. Then, without warning, the tide shifts. You make one small, spontaneous choice, and suddenly the path clears. Opportunities appear out of nowhere. This happens more often than we realize, yet we usually dismiss it as a string of good luck. But why does the flow vanish just as quickly as it arrives? Something strange happens in these moments of friction. We often overlook the fact that our struggle isn't with the world around us, but with a signal we have been taught to ignore.
This pattern appears in our careers, our relationships, and even our creative sparks. It suggests that your effort isn't a measure of your worth, but a readout of your current alignment. Watch closely, because the mechanism behind this is far simpler than most people imagine. Most people categorize their lives into good days and bad days. On a good day, the green lights seem timed for your arrival. You find the exact information you need in a random book or a passing conversation. These moments of sudden alignment feel like a gift from nowhere. But then the pattern shifts. You enter a cycle where every effort is met with a bureaucratic wall, a misunderstanding, or a mechanical failure. This is the strange consistency many people notice. When we are in the flow, everything is a shortcut. When we are out of it, even the simplest path is blocked. We usually misinterpret this as a wave of random luck or a string of unfortunate coincidences. However, if you look closer, these shifts often happen right after a specific internal change. The repetition begins to reveal something deeper than mere chance. Have you ever noticed how the world seems to harden or soften based on your state of mind? This is where the pattern becomes clear. It is not the world changing its mind about you. It is a reflection of a hidden structure that responds to a signal you are constantly sending. This is where the experience begins to make sense.
We are taught to believe that the harder we push, the more we achieve. But the pattern suggests something entirely different. The resistance you feel isn't a test of your character or a hurdle to overcome. It is a biological and vibrational readout. In this framework, your highest excitement is not just a fleeting emotion or a luxury for the lucky. It is a highly sophisticated navigational tool. It is the physical translation of your alignment with your true self. When you follow that thread of interest, life feels effortless because you are finally moving in the direction of your own momentum. Conversely, when life feels heavy and hard, you are essentially trying to drive a vehicle with the parking brake engaged. This reveals something important about how reality works. The friction is not coming from the world around you. It is the internal heat generated by moving against your own natural frequency. This teaching is far simpler than most people expect because the signal has been with you since the day you were born. It is the quiet hum of resonance that tells you exactly when you are home. This is the hidden rule behind the experience. We often think of our lives as a single linear track where we must navigate obstacles through sheer force, but the mechanism is far more fluid. Imagine a radio dial. When you are in a state of alignment, following your excitement without expectation, you are tuning your frequency to a specific broadcast of reality.
In this version of your life, the coincidences, the open doors, and the effortless connections are already part of the signal. They aren't being created in that moment. They are simply what exists on that frequency. This explains why the pattern behaves this way. When you ignore your internal signal and force yourself into a task that feels heavy or wrong, you are effectively switching the channel. You have tuned into a frequency where resistance is the primary language. It is like trying to hear a symphony while being tuned to a station playing static. The static isn't a punishment, it is simply what that frequency sounds like. Suddenly, the shift begins to make sense. The world doesn't become difficult because you are failing. It becomes difficult because you have tuned into a version of reality that doesn't resonate with who you actually are. This mechanism has been operating quietly in the background of your life since the beginning, responding to every subtle shift in your internal compass. If the mechanism is so simple, why do we find it so difficult to follow? This is where many of us lose the signal. The moment excitement sparks, a second voice usually follows closely behind. It speaks the language of practicality, security, and common sense. We are conditioned to believe that if something feels easy or joyful, it must be a distraction from the real work. We often mistake this internal resistance for wisdom or maturity.
We tell ourselves that ignoring our excitement is simply being responsible. But in reality, this is the moment the inner voice begins to argue against your own nature. We choose the safe path only to find that it leads straight back into the heavy friction we were trying to avoid. How often do we talk ourselves out of a brilliant impulse because it didn't look like a traditional plan? We cling to the shore of the familiar, even when the current is trying to pull us towards something better. This fear of uncertainty creates a layer of static that drowns out the very guidance we need. If you've ever felt that internal tug-of-war between a gut feeling and a logical doubt, I'm curious to hear how you navigated it in the comments. Recognizing this split is the first step toward reclaiming your frequency. How do we actually begin to turn the dial? Despite the resistance of the logical mind, there is a simple method for testing this mechanism in your own life. It isn't about making a massive career change or a dramatic leap of faith. It begins with the very next moment available to you. First, look at the options in front of you and identify the one that contains even a tiny spark of more excitement than the others. Second, act on that excitement to the very best of your ability, taking it as far as you possibly can until you can take it no further. Finally, and most importantly, act with zero attachment to a specific outcome. This is where the navigation begins.
By moving toward what resonates, you are signaling to the mechanism that you are ready for that frequency. This process works best when followed with a sense of light curiosity rather than the pressure to succeed. You aren't forcing a result. You are simply exploring a trail of breadcrumbs laid out by your own alignment. This is how the signal becomes action and how a stagnant day begins to shift into a different timeline. If this perspective resonates with you, consider subscribing as we continue to explore the hidden intersection of consciousness and reality. The shift rarely starts with something dramatic. It usually begins in the quiet gaps of an ordinary afternoon. Imagine you are sitting at your desk, overwhelmed by a project that feels like dead weight. Suddenly, you feel a tiny, stray impulse to go buy a specific book or call an old friend you haven't spoken to in years. Your logical mind calls it a distraction, but you decide to follow the spark anyway. You go to the bookstore, and while reaching for that book, you strike up a brief conversation with a stranger who happens to be looking for exactly the skill set you offer. This isn't a miracle, it is the mechanical result of changing your frequency. By choosing the path of least resistance and highest interest, you stepped off the track of struggle and onto a timeline where that encounter was already waiting. This is often how the shift begins.
You may have already experienced dozens of these moments and simply dismissed them as lucky coincidences. But when you look back, how many times has a small, illogical decision completely changed the direction of your day? These signals appear in the most mundane situations, waiting for you to recognize them as the navigation coordinates they truly are. This changes the way we understand the experience of being alive. We often view ourselves as travelers moving through a fixed, solid world, where the future is something we must build through sheer labor. But the pattern reveals a deeper meaning. It suggests that reality is not a single immovable block, but a vast spectrum of simultaneous possibilities. In this view, the hard life and the aligned life both exist right now as potential frequencies. Your excitement isn't just a happy emotion. It is the resonance of the version of you that is already living that preferred reality. When you follow the signal, you aren't creating a new world. You are simply shifting your perspective to the one where the doors are already open. This suggests something remarkable about the nature of existence. You are not a victim of circumstances, but a conscious navigator of timelines. Every small impulse toward what resonates is a coordinate guiding you toward a version of yourself you have not yet fully explored. You may already be standing at the threshold of this realization in your own life, noticing that the more you honor the signal, the more the solid world begins to feel like a reflection. The struggle was never a requirement. It was only a sign that you were looking at the wrong channel. Perhaps the signal has been there all along, hidden in the moments you dismissed as mundane or coincidental. As you move back into the rhythm of your day, you may begin to notice patterns in your experience that were previously invisible. The friction that once felt like an obstacle can now be seen as a gentle correction, a reminder to return to your own frequency. Sometimes the shift begins simply by noticing. Pay attention to those small, quiet impulses that pull you toward curiosity, for they are the coordinates of a version of you that is already home. How often have these signals appeared quietly in your life, waiting for you to recognize them? If you find yourself ready to listen more closely, the exploration appearing on your screen now goes deeper into the mechanics of how these internal shifts reorganize the world around you. This is only the beginning of understanding how your alignment shapes the nature of your reality.